Now, for those who are keeping track, last week we shattered the previous record for the number of new unemployment filings in a given week. And this is not a record that you would be proud of. This is kind of like that kid in high school who had the record for the most days absent throughout the entire year. And guess what, guys? We did it again. We shattered the record that we just beat last week by a multiple of almost 2. So just to recap here, guys, last week, that number of new unemployment filings ending in the week of March 21st came in at just around 3.3 million new unemployment filings, and the previous record set back in 1982 was 695,000 new filings. So we beat that record by a multiple of roughly 4.8 times what the previous record was set back in the 1980s. So just this morning, the Department of Labor released the new numbers that show us how many people filed for unemployment last week, ending in March 28th, and that number came in at an astounding 6.6 million new unemployment filings in that week. And if we're keeping track, which of course we're keeping track here, guys, that is roughly double last week's record-setting numbers and roughly 9.5 times the previous all-time high record for unemployment filings back in 1982. So in 2 weeks' time here, roughly 10 million people have filed for unemployment, which is a number that it's even hard to even explain how bad and big and scary this number is. This chart that I've seen posted all over the place really paints the best picture here of how much of a jump in unemployment this is. And this is something we have never seen in history, as we're seeing numbers breaking records by a multiple of almost 10 based on that record set back in 1982. Now, the good news is this is due to the massive closure of businesses and shutdown of economic activity related to the pandemic that is going on right now, whereas in previous years when we set records, that was an underlying economic crash or some kind of bubble that had burst. And the good news is that going into this, the economy was pretty much healthy and we were in a good, prosperous economic state. So hopefully, once the virus peaks here in the United States and business activity returns to normal, the majority of these people should find themselves employed again. And the hope is that many people who had money that they were going to be spending on vacations and travel and dining and entertainment, well, they're still going to have that money to spend. And so hopefully, depending on how long this lasts, the economy will snap back to life and unemployment rates will plummet. Now, in this new report here for unemployment, we also found out that, not surprisingly, the biggest jump in new unemployment cases were number 1 in California with about 692,000 new claims, and number 2, my home state, gotta represent here, guys, New York State, 286,000 new claims. And this is logical because that is where some of the most drastic action is being taken as far as business closures, social distancing, and overall economic shutdown. Now, how does this compare with the most recent recession back in 2008? Well, the peak unemployment filings in a given week during that recession period happened in March of 2009 when 665,000 new people filed for unemployment. However, it's not really a fair comparison to compare an economic recession related to a housing market crash to a pandemic that is totally out of our control, but that is what we saw during the peak of the 2008-2009 housing market crash. Now, just how bad will unemployment get? Nobody knows for sure, but there are some scary predictions being thrown around. And first of all, let's look at some of the biggest economic recessions in history and the unemployment figures for those periods before we get into some of the predictions. So first of all, the record for overall unemployment was back in 1933 at 24.9%, and that was followed by a period of unemployment that was pretty much over 10% for the next decade or so, also known as the Great Depression. And then in 1982, when that previous weekly unemployment record was set, unemployment hit 10.8% that year. And in 2009, after the housing market crash, we saw unemployment hit 9.9% at its peak. Now, under normal circumstances, according to the Federal Reserve, unemployment should be around 3.5% to 4.5%, indicating a healthy economy. And believe it or not, we actually don't want unemployment to get too low because that can also indicate an unhealthy economy. So 3.5 to 4.5% is the range that we want to be in. And in 2019, unemployment was at 3.5%, the very bottom range of where we want unemployment to fall, making this an over 50-year low for unemployment, the lowest rate seen since 1968. So going into this, we were at a 50-year low for unemployment, and then that all went to the wayside here with the mass layoffs relating from these business closures. But the point I'm making here, guys, is that going into this, we were in a very good, prosperous economy that didn't really have any underlying ailments. Sure, we did see some stocks trading at, record high valuations, and there may have been some bubbles within the market, but we didn't have some major economic crisis going on going into this black swan event. So just how high will unemployment go? Here are a couple of predictions. Goldman Sachs expects unemployment to peak at 15% this year, and this is on the more conservative side. The Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis expects 47 million people will lose their jobs in Q2 of 2020, which would result in an unemployment rate of 32.1%, a rate never seen before. That's dating back to the Great Depression. The peak was 24.9. And lastly, Keenan Institute predicts 11.5%. So based on these different analysts and universities, we have a range here of 11.5% to as high as 32%, and there are many predictions that fall in between. But the scariest part about this, guys, is that people were posting estimates about what they expected this week's unemployment numbers to be, and the general consensus estimate was 3.5 million new unemployment filings this week, and as we said earlier, that number came in at 6.6 million. So they missed the mark massively, essentially showing us that nobody has any idea what the economic fallout is going to be in terms of unemployment numbers. So there you have it, guys. We have had another record-breaking week for unemployment, and probably the worst is yet to come based on what we are seeing. And we have some pretty abysmal numbers coming out in terms of estimates for how bad unemployment could get here as a result of the economic fallout. If you guys enjoy these update videos, all that I ask is that you drop a like on this video for the YouTube algorithm, and if you want to be notified of future uploads, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. But I'll do my best to keep you guys updated here behind the scenes. I have nothing better to do, so I'm pretty much glued to the news and updating you on anything you may want to be aware of as an investor or someone keeping track of the overall economy. But thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.